Welcome everyone to today's service. And the subject we're going to talk about today is Jonah and the whale. And you may remember this story. It's speaking to times in our lives when we ignore what we know is the right thing to do. So our song that we're going to sing first is called Hide Me Away, O Lord. And of course, in many respects, that's exactly what Jonah did.
Give me your peace, O Lord. Give me your peace, and in the day of trouble, neath the shadow of your wings. Give me your peace, O Lord. Give me your peace, O Lord. Safe in your dwelling place. Safe in your dwelling place. Safe in your dwelling place. Safe in your dwelling in the day of trouble, neath the shadow of your wings. Safe in your dwelling place. Safe in your dwelling place. Hide me away, O Lord. Hide me away, O Lord. Hide me away, O Lord. Hide me away, in the day of trouble, neath the shadow of your wings. Hide me away, O Lord. 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 Hide me away, O Lord.
Hide me away, O Lord. Jonah was a man who made quite a few mistakes. So let's say together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. So you may be familiar with this story. Some people are. Anyway, this is the story from Jonah 1. It's a very short book of the Bible, by the way. There's only about, I think, 5 chapters. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid and cried out to his own God. Then they tried to find different ways to prevent the ship sinking. They cast lots to find out who caused it, and it was Jonah, of course. They found him asleep, which surprised them, and they asked him what was happening. He answered and added who his God was. So it continues. This terrified them, that's the sailors, and they asked, "What have you done?" They knew he was running away from the Lord because he'd already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher. So they asked him, "What should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?" And here's what he said. "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and it will become calm. I know that it's my fault that this great storm has come upon you." Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they couldn't, for the sea grew even wilder than before. If any of you have been on the ocean in the height of a storm, It must be absolutely terrifying. I can't say I have, but I've certainly seen movies showing that, and it's really terrifying. Then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, Lord, have done as you pleased." Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. Let's see, I lost my spot here. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. So, what's the moral of this story? The important part is the Lord asked Jonah to go to Tarshish. But what did he do? He went in a different direction. So this is the kind of thing that happens to us all the time, isn't it? So how do you think Jonah felt when we've heard it as the whale, the Leviathan? It was some very large form of a fish. How do you think he felt when he was swallowed up? Did he realize why all this had happened? See, we all make mistakes. That's not the critical part, is it? It's learning from our mistakes. That's how we go through life. If we understand where we've gone wrong, then we can fix it, right? But you're pleased to know that the divine did keep Jonah alive while he was in the fish for 3 days, because under normal circumstances, if it was something like a shark, you'd be gone. So this is what Jonah did when he was in the belly of the whale. And this is from Jonah 2. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, "In my distress, I called to the Lord and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. I said, I've been banished from your sight. Yet I will look again toward your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me. The deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever. But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will make good. I will say, salvation comes from the Lord. And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Now that's a turnaround, isn't it? Because initially he said, I'm not going to Tarshish. And he went in a different direction. But now in Jonah 2, he's realized that was a mistake. And initially thought the Lord had punished him. But was that true? The Lord never punishes anyone. Often when we feel trouble, whatever the reason, we think the Lord is punishing us. The divine never punishes us. We punish ourselves by doing bad things. That's the reality. The very first thing Jonah did wrong was to run away from the Lord and head to Tarshish. I guess that he didn't ask him to go to Tarshish, did he? He said to go to Nineveh. Apologies for that mistake. No, what happened was Jonah decided to go to Tarshish, but actually God had asked him to go to Nineveh. So he ran away from the Lord and headed to Tarshish. So he was in a bad state. We don't really know why he ran away from doing what God asked him to do. Perhaps he was afraid. We don't know from the story. When he finally did go to Nineveh, he didn't like that the Lord spared the city, so he went off to sulk. See, it's that up and down thing that happens to all of us human beings. He was happy for the vine the Lord provided to shade him, but then was upset when it died. God then explains why he spared the city. And that's the end of the book of Jonah. It's actually only 4 chapters. So this is an interesting book of the Bible in that it's talking about Jonah, but it's also talking about us. We do the right thing, then we don't do the right thing, then we do the right thing, then we do something else wrong. There's a similar story in Genesis. This is from Genesis 22. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." Abraham said, "Here I am." Then God said, "Take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Now that's really something for the divine to tell you to go and kill your son. But it was a test. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We'll worship and then we'll come back to you." Now that wasn't true, was it? Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" I wonder if he was suspicious about what was to happen. Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. Wow. You have to wonder what was going on in Abraham's mind. But there was a but. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you've not withheld from me your son, your only son." This is like a prequel to what was going to happen to Jesus in the New Testament. And then Abraham looked up and there was a thicket in it. Let me say that again. Abraham looked up and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide," which of course is the truth. And to this day it said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, "I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed, because you've obeyed me." Then Abraham returned to his servants, and they set off together for Beersheba. And Abraham stayed in Beersheba. So, in this story, it sounds as though Abraham thought God was telling him to sacrifice Isaac. So Abraham thought God had told him to sacrifice Isaac, but did he? Always lots of questions from the Bible. Abraham believed God was testing his faith. But does God do that? I mentioned earlier, God doesn't do bad things to people. People do bad things to people. The answer is God never punishes us. Evil carries its own punishment. We know that, don't we? We learn that actually as a small kid, usually. Jonah comes over as a sometimes very petulant, disobedient person who likes to argue with God. But he eventually got it, didn't he? In that beautiful, beautiful prayer. We're in these stories, aren't we? When do we not do the right thing? Often we're afraid, remember? Fear is a good way to prevent you doing the right thing, because when things are fearful, you can't move, you're frozen with fear, you don't know what to do, you like to hide. And even Jesus went through that. When you think of the Garden of Gethsemane, he did not want to be crucified, but he knew that was the only way to save humanity. And he's there and he's asked the disciples to stay awake. But what happened? They fell asleep at least twice, possibly 3 times. And he was very distressed that they couldn't stay awake. And yet, we do that as human beings. We don't stay awake to the presence of the divine. We don't. And we're human. That's why we're here on earth, to learn to do the right thing and to be the right person. So, what's the take-home message? I've probably given you some of it. True happiness can only be present with those who choose to follow the divine. We don't know what happened to Jonah after those first 4 chapters, because it switches to Micah. I like to think he mended his ways, because he was a bit of a pain early on. He was rather like the young man who had riches, who'd obeyed all the commandments except the coveting. But in one of the Gospels, I think it's John, but I'm not for sure. In one Gospel, it said that Jesus loved him. So here was a young man who had all these riches, right? And Jesus told him to go sell all you have and give to the poor. And he really didn't want to go do that because he liked his riches. So, excuse me. So, the fact that Jesus loved him probably indicated that that young man decided it was important enough. So there are many seas, giant fishes, and opportunities for us to follow the wrong path, aren't there? However, the divine with the angels takes care to guide us away from those turbulent seas. For when you think of the disciples, when they're in the boat and there's these high seas and they don't recognize Jesus walking to them across the water, do they? Again, that blindness, that inability to see the divine acting in our lives is part of our journey of life on this planet. So may God bless you all. May you feel comfort from the divine, especially in your days of fear or sadness. Remember that the divine is with us always, and I bless you all on your journey in this world. Amen. Okay, we don't need this one now.